Today's video is brought to you by DistroKid. Once you have found your sound, release your music to the world using DistroKid. Stick around to the end of the video to learn more and learn how you can get a discount on your first year of membership. What's up, guys, and welcome back to Gabe Miller Music. Today I want to talk about finding your own unique sound and some advice for how to do that. And this is partially based on my own experience and my own kind of music production journey, and also advice that I've heard either personally or in videos from other musicians. Finding a signature sound or tone to your music is a bit of a holy grail for music producers, and a bit of a sign that you've kind of made it, or at least reached an important milestone. You kind of realize that you've found your own signature sound. And I guess the first thing to keep in mind before I get into the proper advice is to realize that this does take time. This is not something that you can just sit down for an afternoon and decide what you want your signature sound to be. And this is not something that you can just kind of think into existence. This is something that takes making a lot of music and a lot of practice and some intentionality, but most importantly, just a lot of time spent making music in order to arrive at. And also be aware that people's signature sounds evolve over time. This most definitely happens when you're going from kind of a beginner status to intermediate status. Your sound probably goes from kind of janky to something that you're actually more proud of. And you should definitely lean into that progression and that improvement and that shift in sound. And this also goes for people who are really well known and at the top of their game. A good example from kind of mainstream EDM being Skrillex. When he was making dubstep back in 2012 and 2013 with Scary Monsters and Ice Sprites and Bangarang and all that kind of stuff, he had a very distinct sound at the time. And that sound slowly evolved into the kind of the Jack U stuff, which sounds very different, and now he's kind of stuck with that kind of tonality to his music. And if you listen to his whole discography from start to now, you can actually kind of pick up on that progression, how his sound has evolved. But point being, he's always been a very skilled producer, and his sound evolved just naturally as a result of what he was interested in listening to, what he was interested in making, and that kind of thing. And that does lead us to one thing that's very important to note before I get into like really concrete steps you can take. Your signature sound is first and foremost kind of this amalgamation of what you like and what you want to hear in music. Having a very clear understanding of what kind of music you like and why you like it, and intentionally incorporating that stuff into your music will go a long way to developing your signature sound. You don't necessarily have to invent a new genre or combine two genres or discover some completely new kind of sound design or melodic writing or anything like that. It can definitely happen, and it can definitely help, and it can become kind of a trademark. However, your signature sound is more than that. It's more all-encompassing than that. For instance, at this point, I like to think I have at least a little bit of a signature sound, and I make a lot of different kinds of music, yet it all still sounds like, oh, that's a Gabe Miller track. That's a Gabe Millerism in that track. That sounds like something Gabe would have made. And I think this is a really helpful thing for a producer and something to be leaned into. So I kind of already alluded to it, but the first kind of proper piece of advice for developing your signature sound is to identify specific aspects of music that you like, why they sound the way they sound, and why they evoke that reaction in you, and then very intentionally start incorporating them into your music. Think of it like you're someone cooking and you have a bunch of different ingredients and spices that you can put into your food. So each element that you discover that you like in the music that you listen to and the music that you want to make is a new ingredient or a new spice you can add. So maybe there's a certain like flow of a chord progression that you find yourself gravitating to and drawn to. So you could learn how to recreate that kind of vibe with your chords and then start intentionally incorporating it into songs. Maybe you like really gritty, dirty kick drums, or if you're like me, you like really clean kick drums with a very specific kind of punch to them. So then, like I have, you would start incorporating those kind of kicks very, very intentionally into songs, no matter what genre you're making. they always have that same kind of tone to them, even if they sound different. It may even be worth keeping a running list on your phone or on a piece of paper or something of these elements that you discover that you like and want to incorporate into your own music. That way, if you're trying to make something that you're working on a little more unique, or you're trying to add some ear candy to it, you can refer to that list and keep that log of stuff that you want to lean into. And of course, what's on that list will probably either grow or completely evolve over time. One way to make sure that it grows and evolves over time is my second piece of advice, which is be very intentional about listening to music outside the genre that you make. So if you are a trance producer, spend some time listening to some dubstep or some country or some jazz or something that's completely outside of what you make. And this is something I've very intentionally done myself. I adore electronic music and listen to a lot of genres within that, which is already quite a bit of variety. And I also listen to a lot of music completely outside the world of electronic music, especially metal and jazz. And maybe on top of that, even throw in a little bit of pop music, a little acoustic stuff, throw in some hip hop for good measure. And you have this big musical vocabulary that you can continue to expand, continue to draw from, and continue to pull unique elements into. Because if, say, you're a progressive house producer and you listen to nothing but progressive house, you're not really being exposed to ideas that are outside the norm of progressive house, so your music is probably going to end up sounding like a carbon copy of the last 5 progressive house tracks that hit the top 5 on Beatport. If you listen to maybe a bit of metal and you incorporate just a little bit of the vibe that it has, just a little bit of the attitude that it has, even if you don't necessarily incorporate any specific elements, if your brain is in a bunch of different genres of music and has that kind of musical vocabulary, you can start to better define your music as something truly unique, not just something that's a carbon copy of other stuff in its genre. My third piece of advice for finding your own sound is to develop an understanding of when to go with your gut and when to second guess your gut when making music. When you're making music, your first instinct usually is representative of what you like the best or what is closest to your musical taste. So for instance, if I have half a melody and I want to flesh it out, usually my first instinct tells me to vary up notes in a very specific way, and it's a very Gabe Miller way, so in that case I would definitely just go with my first instinct. However, the thing to watch out for is your first instinct being something that just rips something else off that you were just listening to. I've had this many times where I make a sick drop or come up with a dope melody that I realize is way too similar for comfort to something that I had just been thinking about or listening to. In that case, don't necessarily have to throw it out, but go, okay, how can I rethink this to make it a little bit different? And so trust your instincts, but also be very aware of them and be aware that you may have to second guess your instincts if you accidentally make something that's too similar to something that you had been listening to. And it can be a little bit heartbreaking to find that something that you just made and that you were really digging is a ripoff of something else and that you have to change it. But in those situations specifically, I've tried to adopt the mindset of different is better than better. Maybe the way you rework it is not quite as good, but it's unique. You're not ripping anyone off and your song is more original as a result. And in the end, that'll serve you better. My final piece of advice for developing your sound is to embrace limitations. And this can come in a few different forms, so let's talk about this real quick. Last year, I did a video on how minimalism and a minimalist mindset can help your music production, and I can link to that at the end of this video so you can watch it with your face. But what I want to specifically mention here is not only the cliche at this point that limitations spark creativity, but also the idea that the better you know a piece of gear or a piece of software, the more equipped you are to use it in a way that brings your signature sound out. You'll start using, say, a synth plugin to do more non-obvious things than just kind of the base level stuff that everyone else does. Or maybe you just get really good at bringing the sounds in your head out into the real world. And either way, both of those things are extremely valuable. And having a more limited gear and software selection not only allows you to know your gear better, but also allows you to go deeper with it and get more unique stuff out of it. So that's one kind of limitation. The other kind of limitation is one that's imposed just for a specific little bit of time, and this comes in the form of song challenges. You've probably seen stuff like that on YouTube before, either from people like myself or folks like Andrew Huang, Davey504, people doing something where they'll make music out of something that isn't an instrument, or take on some other kind of wacky limitation and then be forced to try to make something that sounds good in that context. I've definitely taken a stab at quite a few different kind of musical challenges, and the thing I found is that these can actually kind of force out your inner sound in a way that you wouldn't necessarily expect. So I highly recommend that you take on at least a couple of challenges to work within some pretty extreme limitations and see how it informs your creativity. So something like make a song out of household items, make a song in only an hour, make a song with a really severe track limit, make a song with a really simple, like basic synthesizer, like using only one synthesizer or something like that. These challenges can go a long way into kind of bringing out elements of your signature sound. It's practice reps, and once again, limitations really do spark creativity. One additional piece of advice that I give pretty frequently on this channel for developing your sound and honing your craft is to make and release a lot of songs. And for the releasing part, I recommend that you use today's sponsor, DistroKid. DistroKid gets your music out to listeners onto Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, Google Play, even places like Instagram and TikTok. Memberships start at just $19.99 a year. They offer unlimited uploads. They don't take a cut of what you sell, and that price, which is already much cheaper than a lot of their competitors, can go down even more. If you click the link in the description, you'll get 7% off your first year membership, and it helps me out as well. Thank you so much to DistroKid for sponsoring this video and for being a supporter of the YouTube music production community in general.